So I finished reading The Queen of the Damned and decided to check out the 2002 movie adaptation. And I got a question.
That's what she said. And you know what? What was that? Okay, James.
Hi, my name is Shasha, not Sasha, and I'm a vampire enthusiast. I've made videos comparing different adaptations of the first novel, so before watching this take on Anne Rice's Vampires, I thought, okay, I'll do something similar and basically talk about how the adaptation is different from the original and how the changes implemented impact the story, its tone, and character dynamics. What I did not consider is that the 2002 movie is not only famously trashy, and I do enjoy my fair share of trash. More than that, when it comes to trash, I'm like a raccoon that someone gave coke to, but that's kind of beside the point. What was the point? Queen of the Damned being kind of campy and trashy is not the problem at hand. The problem is that it's so far from the source material that doing any sort of comprehensive comparison is virtually impossible, even though it has been done by Dominic Noble. While other adaptations of Rice's Vampire Chronicles, like the 1994 movie and the 2022 show, do What's up, baby? What's up, baby? Come here. Oh, yellow. Yeah, baby. What's up? You just want to sit down here. You can do that. Yeah, if you just don't, if you don't interfere, you record. Yeah. Oh, you're just the prettiest little guy. While other adaptations of Rice's Vampire Chronicles, like the 1994 movie and a 2022 show, do follow the story, alternate in various ways, but nonetheless hitting the main story beats and using the familiar characters, the 2002 nu metal extravaganza might as well have had Oopie Goopie and Lil Jim Bob as its main characters, since it barely resembles the original. Whether that is for better or for worse is going to be discussed in the video, so don't get your pitchforks out just yet. But proceeding with the usual format kind of makes no sense, so we're switching things up. The studio set out to adapt The Queen of the Damned, but ended up doing something almost completely unrelated. So the question that I want to answer in this video is not exactly how the two pieces of media are different, but why they are so, and what happened. Can you hear him purr? Let's dive into this beautiful, aggressively 2000s mess of a film and the many questions its existence raises, such as, what is Jonathan Davis doing here? And did the production not have enough funding to buy a blonde wig for the guy playing Lestat? And finally, why do all the vampires shop at Hot Topic? Just a short announcement before we really get going. I've started a Patreon with bonus stuff like postcasts for every essay/video and behind the scenes content. So if you want to support the channel over there, check it out. And if not, then no worries. There's a free postcast for the Nosferatu video available to everyone. The links in the description of the video. Okay, let's go. I'm assuming that everyone watching this is at least vaguely familiar with the Vampire Chronicles, but if you're not, here's a short rundown. The Vampire Chronicles is a series of gothic, and no, we're not gonna stop to argue about genres here, vampire novels by Anne Rice. For the sake of understanding this video, you only need to know about the first 3 books: Interview with the Vampire Lestat, and The Queen of the Damned. Like this, which came out in 1976, 1985, and 1988, respectively. I'm also assuming you all have seen, or at least are... What? I'm also assuming you all have seen, or... What? I'm also assuming you all have seen, or are at least aware of, the 1984 movie adaptation of the first novel, Interview with a Vampire, starring chronic poker face Brad Pitt as Louis, the Prince of Scientology Tom Cruise as Lestat, and actually good actress Kirsten Dunst as baby vampire Claudia. The movie is actually a result of Warner Bros. Acquiring the rights to Anne Rice's novels, which already had a hefty fan base behind them in 1988. Fun fact, by the way, both the Vampire Lestat and the Queen of the Damned that I have in my possession, in my personal library come from Warner Books. These are fucking relics of the time with their ugly ass covers, but that's, that's a topic of its own. We're not gonna get into that. Interview with the Vampire, as much as I like to crack jokes about it, was quite true to the material of the first novel, and for the 90s, almost as homoerotic as the original. And if there's one thing I love other than vampires, it's obviously homoeroticism.
This week I saw Interview with the Vampire, and here's my review. Not gay enough.
The public loved this adaptation. The critics were not as mean as they could have been. The money was rolling in, so of course Warner Brothers decided a sequel was needed ASAP. The logical way to proceed was, of course, to keep going down the Vampire Chronicles list and adapt the Vampire Lestat next. As per the oral history of Queen of the Damned, the initial idea that Warner Brothers had was for Neil Jordan, yes, the 1994 Interview with the Vampire director, to continue his reign. For a while, things seemed to be stuck in a Schrödinger's sequel type of situation. It seemed to both be and not be happening. Now, I went on a little snooping spree through archived versions of the official Anne Rice website and found out that in January 1997, the author posted about a meeting she had with Warner Brothers and described the situation as fairly hopeless, following it up with, "There's not a lot of interest in the properties or a lot of understanding of who the audience is." She also read the head of Warner Bros. For absolute fucking filth, writing, "By the way, the name of the head of Warner Brothers is Billy Gerber, and that's just like Gerber, the baby food." And the man was just completely, really unfamiliar with the properties. He was unfamiliar with the scripts I've written and unfamiliar with the ideas. Just didn't really seem to know much about what was going on.
I'm feeling some type of way, and, I'm feeling some type of way, so I'm gonna feel my type of way.
A year earlier, when answering fan questions, she referred to the film rights as being locked up in Warner Brothers, reiterating the statement on the Q&A page of her website and adding, "The Vampire Lestat movie is hopelessly imprisoned in the hands of Billy Gerber and Lorenzo de Bonaventura at Warner Bros. And there is no possibility that the movie is going to be made in 3 years remaining to them. They just really don't have time, so I don't think you're going to see Lestat be made anytime soon. What is going to happen is the property is probably going to revert back to me at the end of the 3 years. I'll get all the vampires back, and at that time, if I wanted to, I could remake Interview. So it was going to be a very, very happy day." Honestly, I would also give up on trying to make the movie if the author of the source material was my number one hater. Granted, Anne Rice was famously very passionate about her work and loved strongly worded statements, which she retracted quite fast at times. Like, she originally hated the studio's decision to cast Tom Cruise as Lestat, but ended up saying he really embodied the character after the movie came out. This, however, did not seem to be the case here. Rice ultimately gave up on trying to achieve something worthwhile and was simply sitting out her time waiting for the rights to revert back to her. I did encounter a claim that Rice begged the executives there to let her write a script for The Vampire Lestat for union scale and deferred payment not due until release of the picture, but they were not interested. This, however, is hard to verify since it comes from a compilation of various posts made and interviews given over the years. And I could not find the post the author of said compilation is referring to, which may as well be due to its deletion or the fact that Rice's website only started getting archived around 1997 with snapshots few and far between. I've decided to include it since I was able to verify other claims from the post and because of the author's stark dedication to archiving everything and anything surrounding the movie. Still, I personally take it with a grain of salt and recommend that you do the same. Warner Brothers, obviously, were not going to go down without putting up a fight for a little profit, so they turned their attention to the next best thing. The Queen of the Damned. According to the Queen of the Damned director Michael Rymer, Anne Rice was quite open and just excited that after quite a few years, they were going to do something. Rymer, as he states in many interviews, is a big fan of Rice's work and was set on adapting The Vampire Lestat. On one occasion, he said, "I tend to agree that the best of the three novels is The Vampire Lestat, but it's also the most episodic and the hardest to make into a feature film. Hard to compress." And in the aforementioned oral history piece by Matthew Jacobs, Rymer mentioned trying to push the Vampire Lestat agenda onto Warner Brothers. "I made my first film, which is called Angel Baby, and got quite a lot of attention. I was pitching all around town, and people would say to me, 'Well, what do you want to do?' If I could do anything in the world, I would like to remake Dune or do The Vampire Lestat. So I got a deal at Warner Brothers to develop it." The Vampire Lestat, while being crucial to understanding what the fuck is going on in The Queen of the Damned, is also quite episodic, to the point where the author herself referred to its form as a failure. It is, therefore, hard to adapt, but skipping it entirely would also have made very little sense. So George Saraleghi, the producer of the movie, ended up merging the two. I'd read The Vampire Lestat, and I ended up coming up with a proposal that combined it with Queen of the Damned. It was always a fuzzy possibility discussed by everyone at virtually every stage. One of the things that didn't go so great, from my point of view, was that basically Courtney said, "Look, we don't really want to do The Vampire Lestat. We'd rather just do Queen of the Damned." And I went, "How can you do the third book if you haven't done the second? These books should be a huge miniseries. They don't have any meaning if you jam them all together." But this is obviously not the only reason the movie's like this. So let's dive a little deeper. The computers all over the world did not stop working on January 1st of Y2K, so in July of the same year, readers of IGN got the opportunity to peek behind the production curtain of Queen of the Damned when Stocks reviewed a draft of the screenplay. In their own words, this draft was written by the film's director Michael Rymer. It is a rewrite of Michael Petroni's earlier vision of Scott Abbott's screenplay. The screenplay reviewed does not seem to be the final version, but it shows the flaws and cracks of the 2002 movie nonetheless. The movie has been in development for years at that point, yet as Stacks rightfully notes, the script is as muddled as the first draft might be. The author goes on to point out that the plot lines are contrived, ripe with underdeveloped characters and hokey dialogue, and that after so many attempts, the basic narrative and the relationships between the characters should be defined, but aren't. The article itself is definitely worth a read, but one of the main criticisms Stacks suggests is that it is trying to do too much and not succeeding. There's simply too many storylines, too many characters, too many jumps from one thing to the other, yet not enough backstory or motivation to make you care about any of it. To quote Stacks once again, basic questions were never answered by this draft. Whose story was this? Who am I supposed to care about? What the heck was all this about anyway? Hopefully, Rymer's subsequent drafts will be major improvements over this one. My gut tells me, though, that the filmmakers have simply bitten off too much to chew and could likely end up with a sprawling mess on their hands.
I would never have been able to unleash such vicious tirades against a bitch who was actually serving.
At this point, however, scraping the entire thing and going back to the drawing board was not an option. Again, remember that the rights were set to return to Rice, who, according to the interviews and her own website, was not involved with the development process at all. As Scott Abbott, one of the screenwriters on the project, reminisced in the oral history piece, by that point, the film had already moved quite far away from the original. I was very aware that I was combining two of her books and turning them into something that they weren't. In the same article, Rymer, the director, stated that the crew was so busy jamming in all those ancient vampires. He then went on to say it was too busy. The script did not have enough substance to justify all these characters and plot. Basically, George and I were rewriting all the way up until we shot, and that was probably not smart. Moreover, the studio was not in direct contact with Rice, who shared the following on her website in March 2001. I do not have any new information about the development of the film Queen of the Damned at Warner Brothers. I'm not in direct contact with the studio. The best way for me to learn what's going on there is through the press or through your calls. This is why I have not posted a message regarding the film. A somewhat contrasting statement was shared by Rice only a little over half a year later, when she said, "I can say now that I have seen some versions of the script over the last, I guess would be over the past 2 years now, but not quite. I have given comments back to Warner Brothers, and frankly, in my opinion, I think they have been very sensitive to my views, and I appreciate that very, very much. Let me say that I think that they have worked very, very hard on the script, and they have been very nice inquiring about my reactions to it." Thus, if we assume that the bit about not breaching the NDAs is true, Rice was involved with the script, but loosely and in the role of an advisor, and the degree to which her comments and feedback made it into the movie remain unspecified. By the year 2000, the project that was initially aiming to adapt The Queen of the Damned drifted quite far from the very book it was based upon, seemingly only retaining a few story points and main characters, and trying to squeeze in some of the vampire Lestat on top of that. This was a widely unpopular decision among Anne Rice fans for the reasons outlined above, which leads me to think that the popularity of The Vampire Lestat as a book and active campaigning of fans for it was part of the reason why the team behind the 2002 movie capped the Rockstar storyline and inserted a fully rewritten, but we'll get to that later, backstory for the Blood Prince himself. But that, again, is my speculation as to why the two stories got smushed together in this way, and I could not find claims to verify it. In the same post from March 2000, Rice mentions that Wes Bentley of American Beauty fame was in negotiations for the role of Lestat. But as with seemingly all media aiming to adapt the Vampire Chronicles, the movie had to go through its own share of production hell, which they had to speedrun due to time constraints. Lestat's role, for one, was also offered to Heath Ledger, fresh off 10 Things I Hate About You, and Ryan Reynolds, of all people. I'm so glad we dodged that bullet. They ended up going with Stuart Townsend because, as per Rymer's recollection, the actor was just riveting in a play called Orpheus Descending. The director explained that the main thing that drew him to Townsend was that the actor had this effect on women. I'm only half woman on my mother's side, so I can't confirm or deny. Townsend, on the other hand, cites another work of his as the role-scoring one. As he shared in an interview with Clint Morris, which was archived by fan blogs, Michael Rymer saw me in a film called Resurrection Man, in which I played a very dark, psychotic character who ends up being a drug addict. And my face ended up looking all goth and white, and with a coat, it actually looked kind of vampiric. I just want to take a moment to thank all the fellow internet nerds that archive stuff, because if it wasn't for them, almost all of the sources would be lost to internet decay. So let's raise a glass, or a cat-shaped mug, to the nerds. Rymer mentioned that among other stars like Halle Berry and Regina King, Cher was considered for the role of Akasha. Yep, the very same Cher that was considered for the role of Louis in that one heavily straight-washed version of the script for the Interview with the Vampire movie. You know, if I had a nickel for every time Cher was heavily considered for a major role in an Anne Rice movie adaptation, but did not end up starring in the movie, I would have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice. As we all know, Aaliyah, who was originally not considered more than a big name to hang the movie on, ended up playing Akasha and outshining everyone else, despite being in the movie for like all of 10 seconds. I think it speaks volumes that long before I knew what Vampire Chronicles were, and when I was but a wee Slavic child, I was already familiar with the imagery of this very hot vampire lady biting into a heart. The concept of using the singer's star power is also evident in the promotional material for the movie, and that was only amplified after Aaliyah passed away shortly after the filming wrapped up, which we'll discuss in a later chapter of the video. Aaliyah's talent, noted by Rice herself, fans, and critics, was vindicated when the movie came out. Rymer, also skeptical of the whole, "oh, let's just put a star here" concept, said the following about testing Aaliyah's acting abilities. "I flew to Vancouver and had a lovely time. She was lovely. I said, look, I'm very serious about this, but I need to know that you can pull this off. for your sake as well as mine. Will you go through a process with me before I say to the studio, I think it will work? And she said, absolutely. So I put that poor girl through the ringer. I got her to learn a monologue from Oscar Wilde's Salome, and then I had her separately working on Egyptian accents.
You know, she has an intense presence. She tried some pretty risky stuff with accent and movement that is really effective.
Similarly to Lestat and Akasha, the character of Jessie went through its own fair share of almosts with a bunch of different actresses, which I'm not going to recap because I don't care much for movie Jessie, and also because you get the point. The road to production was long and rocky. As Anne Rice said in regards to the actors in October 2000, I didn't know a whole lot about all these people. And honestly, same. I went into the movie knowing only that it was kind of trashy and had Aaliyah in it, so imagine my surprise when Mr. himself turned up on the screen. In the words of one John Russell, seriously, imagine for a moment the game of movie development hell telephone that gets us from Anne Rice's 1988 velvet-draped melodrama about a pansexual vampire who becomes a new romantics-era rock star to Korn lead singer Jonathan Davis, a white man with dreadlocks, who did all the music for this movie. You know, I think literacy is important. I love a bitch who can read. The 2002 Queen of the Damned did more than just embrace the new metal of it all. It put the sound first. As per Jonathan Davis, the aforementioned Mr. The studio wanted the songs before they even cast the movie. Fun fact, by the way, Davis did all of the vocals in the film itself, but it's a bunch of other vocalists we hear on the official soundtrack album, because Sony would not clear the rights to his voice. To quote the guy himself, my fucking record label, Sony, wouldn't sign off the rights to my voice to record for Warner Brothers. They said, well, he can sing in the movie, but not on the soundtrack. I go, are you fucking kidding? Then Warner Brothers came up with an idea. Let's use our artists and they'll sing your tunes. I said, fine. This musical switch up, as rightfully noted by Russell, shifts the tone of the story and the characterization of the protagonist, Lestat, in a major way. Instead of this theatrical band that was described in the original novel, we get a more toned down 2000s lack of extravaganza that I will loosely classify as nu metal, because genres are dead and engaging in polemics about them is pointless. Another major change in regards to the Rockstar storyline is the absence of Lestat's autobiography. In the book, Lestat breaks practically all vampire rules he does and does not know, committing the history of vampires as a species to writing and revealing his identity to millions of human fans. He does this, by his own admission, to attract attention of other bloodsuckers and wreak havoc, and also as a reaction to the popularity of Interview with a Vampire. And the gesture of writing and publishing a whole autobiography plays a big role in Lestat's characterization. We get none of that in the movie. Instead, Lestat just keeps a journal where he briefly describes his turning by the fangs of Marius, of all people. Lestat was turned by another vampire, Magnus, in the book, and the entire story of his life is completely different. It serves as an explanation for why he is the way he is and shapes Lestat into the beloved attention seeker and authority disrespecter. In the movie, he's just kind of emo and teenage angsty and mad at Marius and his stupid rules and his stupid little gay hairdresser coded behavior. As Mischief Managed rightfully notes, if you accept that Marius was Lestat's maker, Lestat just seems like kind of a jerk when he won't tell Louis about anything that he learned. Most importantly, Lestat is not blonde. Not even a remote dirty blonde. I can forgive a lot, but I cannot forgive this. In the words of the movie's producer Sarah Legge, Stuart Townsend didn't have blonde hair. Anne Rice makes a huge deal out of Lestat having blonde hair, and Tom Cruise had blonde hair in Interview with the Vampire. We tried the blonde hair on Stuart. He hated it. But we also agreed that he didn't look great, so we let him have his own hair. It does seem to be a small detail, but that fuck-ass long blonde bob is vital to the character. It's something his identity and characterization largely hinge on, especially if you consider how vain Lestat is when it comes to his hair specifically. And of course, the bisexual question. As Rice's son Christopher pointed out in the oral history of the project, Lestat, one of the most popular bisexual heroes of popular fiction, was given a romantic relationship with a female character with whom he barely interacts in the novel, and all suggestions of his past male lovers were erased. Abbott, one of the screenwriters, says, "That was never discussed or debated in regards to vampiric bisexuality, a very important aspect of blood-sucking life in Rice's work. The very aspect that allows all sorts of messy and messed up relationships to happen and be explored, as well as serve as vessels for exploration of larger topics." In his 1997 book, Monsters in the Closet, Harry Banshoff refers to Rice's body of work and its popularity as probably the most important development in recent queer horror. And the 2000s were prime time for bi-exploitation. We were hip, we were cool, we were so in that even Katy Perry wanted a piece of the pie. Similarly, the decision was not popular among Anne Rice's readers, many of whom felt represented in her bloodsuckers. So the movie further alienated itself from the fanbase it could have milked millions out of. All of this combines into a feeling that the movie just does not understand Lestat as a character. I mean, the straightification was to be expected, but god fucking damn, were they out of money? Could they not afford to buy some bleach and give that man some fucking highlights? The only point they somewhat hit is the Rockstar arc, and even that was changed drastically, from the motivation to the very nature of the musical act. Maybe the vainness too, but such drastic mischaracterization of Lestat in the Lestat show and the Lestat book franchise was definitely not the best decision, in my opinion.
About 5 minutes ago, I looked across at Miss O'Hara and realized that she was ugly. And I'm at peace with that.
Let me make it clear that I don't think Stuart Townsend is the film's main fault. I've encountered many a take that he lacks charisma to be a proper Lestat, but in my opinion, the concert scenes demonstrate a lot of potential. The acting performances are overall pretty solid, but it's hard to compete with Aaliyah once she appears on screen, obviously. For one, I think that Townsend had a pretty good understanding of Anne Rice's work as a non-fan, seeing as he shared the following in an interview. I read Interview. I wasn't a big fan of her work, but I love her themes. She brought a whole new side to it. Before vampires were like the boogeyman, I think she brought a human element to it, struggling with eternity. I'm with vampires on that, and she brought the homosexuality to it too. Now, I personally don't mind casting swaps and different actors portraying the same character within the franchise. I'm willing to suspend my disbelief. And it can be done pretty well, like in the new 2022 show, where the actress portraying Claudia could not continue with the project after the first season and was therefore replaced. The show's team had also reshot some scenes with the new actress, which definitely helped their case. But the main reason the switcheroo worked is continuity in the writing and the character. While the delivery is obviously different between the two actresses portraying the same character, Claudia remains more or less the same, and the story started by the first actress is continued by the second. That's not the case with the 2002 Queen of the Damned. Queen of the Damned seems to pretend this Lestat just happens to have the same name as that Lestat, especially when they utilize the lazy writing cop-out of Lestat having a diary where he details his life and somehow never mentions the whole Louis debacle. To quote Russell again, "End of diary, nothing else ever happened to Lestat between 1788 and 2002, especially not a full-on homo-gay relationship in New Orleans with Brad Pitt." Additionally, the character himself differs quite a bit, not only from the book Lestat, but from the 1994 movie Lestat as well. There's simply not enough substance in him. The Queen of the Damned Lestat is just kinda meh, to put it nicely. The most interesting episode where we do get a peek at the original character depicted in the novels and the 1994 movie is probably the scene where Blondie feasts on a couple of groupies, but not before he engages in unnecessary theatrics of crawling around on all fours and up the wall. Like, this is true Lestat behavior. Speaking of groupies, what about Jessie, one of the main characters of the original novel? Philip Ellis puts it beautifully in their piece for Men's Health. As it goes, Jessie is flattened into yet another swooning groupie who exists to reassure viewers who saw Interview with the Vampire that they needn't worry. Lestat likes women in this movie. The movie's bold choice to make a couple out of Lestat and Jessie could have worked in theory, but in reality, it takes away from one of the major characters in the novel. In the book, Jessie's history with vampires is complicated, seeing as she was raised by one without even being aware of it, and her witchy powers and abilities lead her to take on a job for the Talamasca, an organization that researches, archives, and catalogs all things preternatural. It is through that job that she becomes fascinated with the undead, because they do not only interest her as a research object, but also answer some questions she had to carry with her throughout her entire life. In the movie, she's simplified into, and I'm gonna quote Russell again, a red-hat lady who is sensibly doing her postgraduate degree in paranormal vampire investigating with a concentration in early 2000s goth fashion at Talamasca University, or whatever. As you can deduct from the frequency of me quoting that one piece, it's fucking great and should be read in full. If you enjoy a la Mike's Mike recaps, you'll definitely like this. Back to Jessie though, her entire storyline gets flattened and now revolves fully around Lestat and the fact that she wants him to make her his bloodsucker bride. Boring, yawning, sloppy, lazy. Book Jessie is a complex character with a stake in the events. Her literal family and life's work is on the line. She's fully aware of the danger the vampire shenanigans put her in, yet drawn to the mystery specifically surrounding Lestat, because he's the one she spent literal years researching and chasing after. So I could see how the fascination described in the book could be reworked into a fully fleshed out romance or tension, but the writers used this as an opportunity to simplify the character, presumably in an attempt to squeeze in as much content as they possibly could into a movie that's barely over 100 minutes long. Just like in Lestat's case, Jessie is only similar to her book counterpart in some details, like her red hair and work for the Talamasca. But with the amount of differences present, the authors might have as well named her Jenny or something. Finally, we get to what Alice referred to as the Aliyah of it all, Akasha's character in Arc. In the book, it is Lestat's music that awakens Akasha after thousands of years of vampire slumber, but she also says multiple times that it was not the only factor, and that she's been ruminating on these topics for as long as she was in that statue state. Basically, the entirety of The Queen of the Damned is built on the clash of different philosophies. Akasha comes to life and goes, "You know how to make this world into heaven? Kill 90% of man," and then proceeds to spread this idea in multiple test locations, planning to make it global later.
Bethany, I've killed 2 people so far for you, and I even asked their pronouns before I started stabbing. Inclusivity win. Keep up the good work. Please don't encourage your followers to commit murder. Whether they do so is up to them.
The main crew, made up of the vampires we know from the vampire Lestat and ancient bloodsuckers such as Pandora and Cayman, opposes her and tries to persuade her to stop. I am oversimplifying it here, but the movie does not even get to that point. There, Akasha is just like evil for the sake of being evil, I guess. Her whole thing is that she's this vampire supremacist that does not care for humans at all, which makes no sense when we compare her to the book Mother. What influences the tone is the fact that Akasha, who's been haunting Lestat since the end of the second book, is turned into a third act villain in the movie, which kills the tension before it can even start to build up. As Dave Pierdomenico rightfully notes, the titular queen Akasha really only shows up in the third act, and even then, she's not given a whole lot to do. It's all the more frustrating when you realize that we could have gotten an entire movie focused on her. Even though Akasha is flattened into a boring vampire villain, she's still the star of the show. And she's the one who gets the campiest, freakiest, most interesting scenes. Ken Kay, when talking about the mother, writes, "How are you just gonna tongue kiss a stranger, rip his heart out, suck the blood from it, then start immolating everyone in a private vampire bar. This was that biblical savagery they were talking about in the Old Testament. Instead of an exploration of the two points of view on whether the vampires are allowed to interfere into humanity's fate and what role they should play in said fate, we get an action scene with Disney villain-style dialogue. Similarly, the story of the twins, which is the foundation of the entire mess, just gets cut from the narrative entirely. Somehow, both of the twins are still there. Maharet joins the main cast closer to the finale, and Mikare can be seen in the visions Lestat experiences when drinking Akasha's blood. But then, again, what for? Why are the twins there then? Why are they there then? Why are the ancients there if all they do is just spew exposition dialogue and then, like, bite Akasha a couple of times? Surely we don't need that many fucking people to do it. Once again, we see the movie use some of the characters and plot points from both of the books and simultaneously ignore all the important events, storylines, and motivations described in said books. Queen of the Damned is an adaptation only in theory. Like, yes, we do get a story about the rock star Lestat and the mother of all vampires Akasha, and like a bunch of bloodsuckers and humans alike die, but that's really all the similarities. Rymer, the director of Queen of the Damned, literally said he didn't think the two properties were depicting the same stories. I apologized to Anne Rice when I went to send a cut of the film to her. I said, I don't think I've got your book on film at all. Thus, while I lightly touched on the main ways the movie is different from the books it was set to adapt, I don't see the reason for a more detailed comparison. The two stories barely resemble each other. And as I've outlined in this chapter as well as the previous one, the movie version started drifting away from the books quite early on and was soon almost unrecognizable, which is exactly why it does not work as an adaptation. Queen of the Damned is a time capsule of the late 90s and early 2000s before it's a silver screen retelling of Anne Rice's work, and it should be judged as such. Rice herself said that the movie disappointed the vast majority of the book's fans and failed to turn them into the kind of self-motivated publicity force you need to launch IP like this on the big or small screen. She affirmed the very point I'm making.
And the movie was not really based on my work. They used the names of the characters, but they replaced original material with material that they had written for them by a scriptwriter.
So let's try to look at Queen of the Damned as a standalone movie and analyze its strengths and weaknesses as such. I've already briefly mentioned some of the criticisms I have of the movie, but they are all part of the larger criticism. Queen of the Damned does not seem to know what it is and takes itself too seriously. Rymer referred to it as not the movie he set out to make, and that's really all you need to know. In interviews surrounding the release, the cast and the creators seem to be aware that this adaptation is not as serious as Interview with the Vampire, that it's a little tongue-in-cheek. The tonal shift between the two movies could have been similar to the one that happens between the first and the second book, but ended up landing neither here nor there. In an interview given during filming, Michael Rymer mentioned the difficulty of nailing a certain mood the movie was trying to convey. As the director explained, the tone is not camp. I mean, the tone is light. I mean, come on, it's a rock and roll vampire movie. How serious can you be? It's fun. It's a fairy story. And a fun and fairy story it is. The entire premise of a vampire rock star and an ancient Egyptian queen trying to take over the world while new metal blasts out of the speakers is incredibly silly and could have served to create a camp masterpiece, but ultimately failed to do so due to taking itself too seriously. Throughout the whole movie, we see camp struggle against the creator's desire to make a vampire drama. Dave Pierdomenico refers to Queen of the Damned as an odd Lestat-inspired fever dream of a movie, and I could not agree more. To illustrate my point, I want to turn your attention to the moments that do land and stick out. For instance, Aaliyah's performance outshines everyone else's for one simple reason. Akasha's whole arc is absurd and deeply unserious, and Aaliyah really puts the mother in Mother of All Vampires.
Watch me eat. Watch me eat.
While everyone else is trying to push out a realistic and dramatic acting performance based on a script that barely makes any sense, Aaliyah's more overt and at times even comedic delivery suits the tomfoolery going on much better. This difference in approach can be seen in the bonus content released on Blu-ray and as bonus promo materials.
And it's fun to go to the movies and escape and really get deep into the whole fantastical characters. And I myself have always loved the dark side as well, so I think it's something that everyone secretly longs for and wants.
Similarly, the scenes that embrace the silliness of it all, such as the concert fight scene or vampire sex set to Deftones, are the most memorable out of the entire movie, because they aren't afraid of their strictly 2000s unserious nature. The choppy editing and the visual effects that dated quite fast also contribute to the aesthetic. The problem lies here. Rymer and co. did not intend to make a campy movie. As the director himself admitted in the oral history, the movie wasn't scary. I don't think visually I got quite the world that I was trying to create. It ended up being a bit more glam. The failure to embrace sad glam is, in my opinion, the main pitfall of the movie.
On the bottom, Paige, you were good. I'm waiting for you to be great.
The other part of my main criticism is that the movie does not seem to know the story it's trying to tell. As rightfully noted by Stax in their critique of the script draft, the narrative never quite came together since it was tough to discern just whose story it was. It was not quite Lestat's story, since he's not in the second half as much as he should be. It is not quite Jessie's story either, since she spends the first half of the script reading Lestat's book, and the second half tagging along with the ancient vampires. It is also not really Marius' story, even though he's a major supporting character. Then, nearly halfway through the story, Maharet is introduced, and much of the action revolves around her. Akasha finally appears in Act 3 and soon takes over the story. There were simply far too many characters crammed into Queen of the Damned. I'd argue that the same applies to the final product. Queen of the Damned is all over the place, jumping from Lestat's backstory to his vampire rockstar adventure, then to seemingly pointless war on humans declared by Akasha, then to Jessie and her obsession with this weird-ass fanged dude, then to Maharet and the Ancients. And none of those storylines come together or influence each other in a meaningful way, because just setting them up eats up the entirety of the movie. Like, why are we supposed to care that Lestat has joined forces with Akasha? What does the band plot have to do with anything? Who is Jessie, other than a vampire groupie majoring in spookery studies? So many questions remain unanswered, but at the same time, you as a viewer are not made to care about them enough. One of my notes from watching the movie simply says, just so wrong. And I couldn't have been more right. Now, even though I enjoy criticizing this movie, I also need to highlight its strengths. The contemporary soundtrack is great, the action sequences are not half bad, and in my opinion, Queen of the Damned manages to capture some of the inherent eroticism of Rice's novels. Marguerite Moreau, the actress portraying Jessie, said that what stood out to her about the movie is how sexy it is. It's all innuendo. And if anything in Queen of the Damned really nails Rice's depiction of vampire laissez-aller type of sexuality, it's that one scene set to Deftones. More to that, I personally enjoyed some of the visual choices, dated as they might seem now. To me, Queen of the Damned is emblematic of that period where movies were not afraid of being creative with their CGI use, but have not made the full switch from practical effects to computer graphics just yet.
Well, we have the original green screen, and we had the original background. What we did is we stabilized that background and did a little time warp, and then just did a basic composite, making sure that they stayed in contact with the ground. We did a few little experiments, keying off certain images in the background. We created some sort of graphic elements that we combined into the shot.
Watching this movie as a standalone piece of media makes it infinitely more enjoyable, because instead of trying to figure out what happened and how we got from Rice's story to this, you can fully submerge yourself into 2000s nu metal extravaganza. At the same time, while watching this, I could not help but wonder what it could have been if the team behind it embraced the camp and the silliness of the premise, instead of trying, in vain, to match the tone of the original, from which they kept virtually nothing but character names. Maybe that's the thing I love the most about Queen of the Damned. The film it could have been. There is, however, more to be said about the movie and its legacy. Shortly after filming wrapped up, Aaliyah died in a plane crash.
The plane crash that killed a rising star in the world of music and film. Reaction today after Aaliyah and 8 others were killed when their plane went down.
Well, my family and I were very, of course, devastated by what happened, but we knew how important this project was to Aaliyah. She worked very hard and she was very excited about it. So, although many people were skeptical about our feelings about the release and what would happen, we knew what we wanted and we knew what she wanted, and that was for the film to come out and be amazing and be successful. So we're behind it 100%.
This hindered the editing process, seeing as no reshoots were possible, and the collaboration that Aaliyah and Davis were working on never came to life. As composer Richard Gibbs reminisced about said collaboration that was supposed to be the end credits song, we finished the shoot. John and I were really excited. We were going to get together with Aaliyah and just kind of pick her brain about what she would like to sing about. I was deep in post-production. Aaliyah goes off to the Bahamas to shoot a video for one of her own songs, and then we all know what happened. She was due to come back that week. We never got to write that song with her. BBC reported that sales of Aaliyah's latest album rose almost 700% within a week of her death, and it has been speculated that the movie would try and capitalize on the tragedy. I personally have not been able to find evidence for or against. The singer and aspiring actress was always supposed to be the big name attached to the movie and its selling point, as evident from the interviews given in regards to the casting. Around the movie's release, producer George Saraleghi said the following when commenting on the campaign surrounding Queen of the Damned. What could we do with the marketing campaign? Nothing but go forward and hope for the best. Is it ghoulish? It can certainly be seen that way. Whether that was the intention or not, Aaliyah's death ended up aiding the movie's popularity. At the same time, it acted as one of the factors influencing people to believe that the movie itself was damned. In 2003, Alan Menges brutally killed his friend Thomas McKendrick. The killer claimed he's been ordered to do so by Akasha, the movie character. In his own words, she started off having conversations with me, and it ended up that I had basically agreed with her that if I murdered people, I would be rewarded in the next life. I would be made immortal in the next life. A vampire, basically. Menges, according to The Guardian, has watched the movie over 100 times before committing the crime and was obsessed with it. The two tragedies left a certain mark on the movie's perception, with the story of the so-called vampire killer often being more well-known among non-vampire nerds and non-Anne Rice fans. It is due to this, I theorize, that the movie has not seen a proper revival that a lot of trashy 2000s classics did. Queen of the Damned could have been great, but it's neither here nor there. It rejects its own campiness and tries really hard to squeeze in as many characters from the original as possible, without enough proper in-depth alterations made to the narrative. As a result, we end up with a confusing pile of plot lines and characters, and the unfortunate circumstances surrounding its production, release, and reception have definitely not made it easier for the wider public to embrace Queen of the Damned as a standalone work, possibly the only way it could have been elevated to a legendary status. The movie that was aiming to adapt Anne Rice's work seems to try to distance itself from it, as well as the successful 1994 interview adaptation. It's a convoluted mess of fangs, blood, hot women, and Matrix-style fighting scenes. Still, despite all its flaws and tragic history, the new metal sexy vampire extravaganza that is Queen of the Damned has, very locally, been vindicated in the last few years, with the embrace of camp and cringe among vampire lovers and movie enjoyers alike, as well as a new generation of trashy bloodsucker media enthusiasts growing up. That's me right here. In the words of Letterboxd user Steve Buscemi, this is a very relatable movie because I, too, am swayed by any good-looking person that crosses my path, have a blood kink, and only rise from my coffin at the sound of rock music. I also bought a whole heart because I thought maybe I'll do a bit where I bite into the heart, right? What I didn't take into account is that the heart is plastic. So I put gel blood on it and stuff, so it looks very cool. I don't know if you can see it, if it's in focus, but the biting is not, it's not happening exactly. So here's me, and my heart is going back on the platter. That's it. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, you know the drill. And if you really want to support the channel with some of those sweet, sweet coins that I spend on plastic hearts and bolt caps, you can do so on Patreon. Bye!